Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today we are discussing a rare borderline exotic version of a fairly common watch, but a beloved model. This is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300-meter chronograph in a spectacular combination of white dial and polished bezel. This is a rarity, and it is the first time I've seen this watch since the Watch You Want days back in 2014 and 2015. Given that I see thousands of watches a year, that should be a testament to just how uncommon this variant is. It's 41.5 millimeters in diameter, 16.4 millimeters thick, lug-to-lug just the case. It's 49.5 millimeters, and if you include the end links of the bracelet, total distance across the wrist is 54.4 millimeters with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. It is a substantial watch by late 90s, early 2000s standards, both in the way it feels, physically massive, and in the way it wears, which is quite broad. This would have been a very large watch by 90s standards, and this case size and bracelet combo came out of the 90s. I would recommend the watch on a strap for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference, and on the bracelet, which adds considerably to the dimension across the wrist. On the bracelet, I'd recommend it for a wrist of my size or larger, so 16 or up. Being over 16 millimeters thick and very cylindrical and sheer in profile, I don't recommend it for a tight dress cuff, though you can try. You should be okay with a jacket cuff, however, principally due to the shape of the bezel. Taking a look at the bracelet, this bowed back in 1993 with the Diver 300-meter family. And it's not quite a dress bracelet, not quite a traditional sports bracelet. For one thing, the staggered and polished micro intermediates give it the look of a dress bracelet. So does the tumble home or rounded off profile of the outer links, but the solidity of it feels like a sports bracelet. It can take a beating. And you can also see that pins and sleeves were used back then. This is a system that actually has merits that I've warmed up to over time. It's not as straightforward to size as a bracelet with screws, but you're not going to strip out small flathead screws, which I've seen too many people do. That won't happen with pin sleeves. Also, pin sleeves never back out, which gives them a great deal of security. This clasp was a revelation back in the 90s. Robust, thick gauge, secure. It forced Rolex to reconsider the quality of its clasps, and for that matter, this bracelet forced them to reconsider the quality of their bracelets. While the design is a little bit betwixt and between the world of dress and sport, note that all of the links, outer, center, and intermediate, are solid. Now we have this thick gauge fold-out dive extension. The snappy tolerances remain crisp. You can see the engraving on the clasp remains deep and well-defined. That's a sign that it's been sparsely and professionally refinished through its life. You can also see that the gauge of the steel in the clasp, as well as the swing arm of the fold, very, very thick. And being twin trigger release, you have to press both, not just one, to open it up. You can also see that you have many removable links, so you will get the right size. Rolling around the case, it's familiar. The Diver 300 meter rose to the status of a legend in its own time on the wrist of Pierce Brosnan during his turn as 007, starting with GoldenEye in 1995. Now, he wore the quartz model and then later the mechanical chronometer, but every version of this Diver 300 meter is considered to be a James Bond watch by association, right down to the case with the lyre-style lugs, polished outer bevels, satinated inner bevels, satinated mid-case. You can see a helium escape valve for saturation divers. Open it, and as you ascend, the helium in the case will be released when the internal pressure exceeds external by 2 to 3 bar. So you have to open it in order to get the advantage, but that is there. And it's important to note that was a major selling point at the time, since you had to pay extra at Rolex to get a Sea Dweller if you wanted this feature. 300 meters, water resistant. Yes, I know 300 meters is not 1,000 feet, but we're going to press the I believe button. The knurling is somewhat shallow. It's easy to grip when your hands are dry, not so much when your hands are wet. So you want to make sure that you set your bezel before your dive, not after. That said, it's a 120 click high precision bezel that has a superb sound and feel to its detent. You can see the blue lacquer in the bezel is still well preserved. Again, speaking to the preservation of this one, we'll do a lume shot so you can get a sense of what it looks like in the dark. Plenty of lume, and all 3 hands loomed, which I think is important on a dive watch because it lets you know your diver is still running during your dive. Those hands, skeleton style, were often described as the James Bond hands. And then we have a dial base with a wave pattern that was often described as the Omega wave, the Bond wave, or the Seamaster wave. This one's an unusual combination of black, sort of a signal orange or signal red highlights, and then the white base. The white base, the tropical colors, and then the combination of the polished bezel with that gives this a very Miami or LA type look to it. And in good taste, Omega matched the color of the date disc with the color of the dial. Now, this is a little bit better than what Pierce would have worn in terms of fit, finish, and dial, because by this point in the early 2000s, we'd started to see applied dial indices rather than the printed features of the Brosnan era. Now, it does have a couple of subsidiary setting modes, because this Omega Caliber 1164 is really a Valjoux 7750 in chronometer spec. So you've got the hacking seconds function, and then, should you need to change the date, you have a quick set function right there. The watch does have a 7750 architecture, which means you get one of the primary attractions of a 7750, which is the oscillating pinion. So an oscillating pinion is a type of lateral clutch that has very little play in it. So when you engage the chronograph, you press and hold. Did you note how little jump there was there? Oscillating pinions are very precise, and we're starting to see them again in high-end chronographs from Richard Mille, de Bethune, and F.P. Journe in applications where the beauty of a traditional lateral clutch is desired, but the precision of a vertical clutch is also preferred. So the oscillating pinion, which is germane to the 7750 architecture, it has that. Function selection is via a cam system, as it is on most 7750 bases. 25 joules automatic winding with unidirectional action, 44-hour power reserve, 5-position adjusted COSC Swiss chronometer. Very tough, very serviceable movement. And this is all pre-coaxial, so it's thinner, believe it or not, than the later watches, and more durable and easier to service. So there's a lot of practical factors that recommend this watch. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.